Thank you for listening to the Tortoise and the Hare Financial Podcast. My name is Jim Leo. In this episode, I'm going to share with you some of the things that I learned in facing death last year. Now, some of the lessons might be obvious, some not so much, and there are still things that I'm learning today. I question God's role in the entire process, and I also question my father's role in it, even though he had passed on a couple of months before they uncovered my issue. And also I haven't talked to my father in about 25 years leading up to the surgery. But before we get started, I'm going to share a word from my sponsor, Anchor.fm. Well, let's get things started. Last year, for those of you who don't know, I unexpectedly found out that I required open heart surgery, and if I didn't have the surgery, I was a few months away from going to bed and not waking up again. That was a scary thought. Where my major blockages were, I had one down the middle artery of my heart, and there was a 90% and a 50% blockage. And when I was told by the cardiac surgeon that once the heart attack happened, because it was going to happen, in that location, that I had a 95% chance of fatality. And if I happened to survive with less than 5% chance, that my life would definitely be very different because there would have been a lot of damage caused to my heart. So it was life-changing for me. And in leading up to it again, there was really nothing that had indicated that there was a problem. And I'll share with you my thoughts on that as well as to why or how we were able to uncover the situation and deal with it before it became fatal, or again, very damaging to me. Now, there were some things that I've learned from facing close death. I think the obvious one, quite frankly, is you really do appreciate how precious life is. I mean, we always know that, right? We know that life is precious, but you really don't appreciate it until you're dealing with a situation where you are about to lose it. And even before I get into things too deeply, it's difficult to explain what that is like to be faced with death and to understand what that really means. I use kind of a comparable where, it's difficult to understand a love for a child until you actually have one yourself, right? I remember when I had Serena with Carol, and people ask, "Well, how does it feel? What is it like?" And it's really difficult to explain. You just don't understand it until it actually happens, and then you understand. And that's what this situation was like for me. I've heard about people dealing with death. I've heard of people facing death and surviving. I just really didn't understand the heaviness of it until it actually happened. And even though it's been over a year, and I've been talking about it a little bit more recently through podcasts and just, I'm talking to people about it. The more that I talk about it, the more I recognize and realize and feel internally how close I was to losing it all, um, and how serious the situation actually was. So life is precious. It really is, and that's taught me to hug my loved ones a little bit longer and to hug them a little bit tighter whenever I get a chance to. And I do it for me because I now don't know if that's ever going to be the last hug that I give. And I do it for them as well for the exact same reason. When we lose someone that we love, we wish that we could just hold their hand or give them a hug or just sit next to them or have a conversation with them. And in life, we really don't know when, that time will come. I looked at my situation when I was younger, and again, no one really thinks about dying young, right? We think about it's going to happen at a ripe old age of whatever that might be. For me, I always looked at, probably in my 80s at some point, that will be when my life would end. And as a result of thinking that way, you think, well, I've got a very long runway and I have so much to do and so much to give, and I've got lots of time on my hands. And when you're faced with the fact that life was very close to being taken away from you, you quickly realize that maybe there isn't that much time, and we should treat every single day, as our last day, especially when we're dealing with our loved ones. I can confidently and easily tell you what my date of birth is, but I can't give you what my date of death is. No one really can. And that's why I think we really need to maybe change how we interact with our friends, with our family, and how we, maybe prioritize things in our lives. I definitely learned to prioritize things a little bit more. I always enjoyed working, and I still do. But I heard someone say one time, I think actually in a podcast, that no one on their deathbed, if they're ever asked if there was something that they wish they could have done more of or had regretted, no one would ever say, I wish I had worked more or spent more time at the office, right? It's always, I wished I had taken more vacations. I wish I had explored the world a little more. I wish that I had spent more time with my family. And I definitely understand that. So now for me, the level of importance, I've readjusted things, I've prioritized things. But family has always been number one for me, and that'll never change. Carol, Serena, Liam, my siblings, my mom, relatives, close family, close friends, they're always going to be at the top of the list for me in terms of priority. But some of the things that I look at a little bit differently is if there is an event that I wanted to go to or something I wanted to try. I no longer sit there and say, well, eventually, eventually, eventually. I really work hard at making it happen a lot sooner. This year has been a bit of a challenge because one of the things that I wanted to do this year with Carol and the kids was to travel out to the East Coast. Hadn't been there in about 15, 20 years. Wanted Carol and Serena and Liam to experience it because they never have. And unfortunately, the COVID situation kind of came into effect, and so that's been delayed. But I definitely push through a little bit more in doing things that I enjoy doing, and don't put them in the back burner as much as I did before. So that's definitely a lesson that I had learned. Another lesson, again, is relationships. And, relationships are very important to me. They always have been. And when you're dealing with, what I dealt with last year, you really put a little more value into those relationships. And the downside to that is it hurts even that much more when you lose those relationships. And I have lost some relationships in the last 12 months, unfortunately, and it's hurt a lot more than maybe it normally would have. And I lost those relationships because of a bad investment advice that was given. And not that the investment itself didn't work out because of predicted economic factors. It was because the people who ran that company are being investigated for financial crimes, and that's impacted a lot of people. It's lost money for people that I'm very close with, and I've lost some really important relationships as a result, and it hurts that much more um, because I care about people. I always did before, but I care about them even, differently, maybe a little more deeper than I used to. But there's really not much that I can do about it. We kind of have to move on from those situations and hopefully learn from them as well. Some of the things that maybe I handle differently is this situation with COVID, but I'll get to that a little bit later. One of the things that I definitely question with what's happened is God's role, and not that I don't believe in God, because I do, and I believe in Jesus Christ as being God's son. I don't go to church on Sundays. I used to, but it's something that I haven't done in a very long time. But I am a believer and I do pray. And even when I was praying the night before my surgery, the morning of my surgery, and literally as I was laying on that operating table right before they had put me under, my my prayer to God was never to spare me. My prayer to God was never to grant me continued life. At that point, I understood it was out of my hands. What I did pray for was for God to bless the surgeon, Dr. Verma, as an example, and to bless the people that were working on me that day, and to help them perform at their absolute best. That's what I was asking for. And I had asked God that if He granted me continued life, that He would then give me the strength to deal with the recovery, because I knew it was going to be a very difficult and long recovery, that He would give strength to my family who was going to be around me to help me go, because I knew it was going to be difficult for them to see me in that situation. So I wanted Him to give them the strength to help me through it. And if the plan was to not save my life, and if I wasn't going to wake up from that surgery, well, then I had prayed that He would give Carol, Liam, and Serena the strength to live life without me in it, and to do the same for my siblings and my mom and the people that were really close to me, my family, my friends, my partners at work, to give them the same strength to move on without me. Now, it's not like I didn't want to live. I absolutely, that was my choice. I did want to live, but at that point it just wasn't in my hands. And thankfully, you know, I was given another chance. I don't know why, but I was given another chance, and I was given the strength to get through the recovery. And here I am today. I also, in speaking about God, one of the things that I do recall was while I was at home recovering, my mom and I would talk about, why I was given that second chance, because I still don't know today, and maybe I'll never know. Maybe one day I'll find out. Maybe I never will, and that's fine. But we would have the conversation in which she would say, "Well, God obviously wanted you to live. He wanted you to have a second chance." And I'm like, "Well, I don't know if that's true. Like, why would God give me that opportunity, but not give it to somebody else in a similar situation? Like, why me? I'm no more special than anybody else." And I struggled with that, and I still do. And she would say things like, "Well, it's because you're young and you're a good person." And that still wasn't good enough for me, because there are a lot of other young, good people out there that they weren't given a second chance. And I just didn't think that was fair, that I was given that chance and someone else wasn't. So then she would say things like, "Well, it's because you had a lot of people praying for you. You had people here in Canada praying for you. You had family in Italy praying for you. You had family in Australia. Like, you had people all over the world praying for you. And that's why you were saved." And I continue to question that, because there are other people who had lots of prayers from lots of people all over the world, and they were still not granted that second chance. And then she would say, "Well, it's because you have young kids and a family and they still need you." And that again just wasn't quite good enough for me, because there are many other people in the same situation that they were not granted the same thing. So if you're someone out there that's listening to this, because it is something that I still struggle with on a fairly regular basis, and you want to provide me with some input or some thoughts, or have a conversation with me, you could reach me at jim@tvhgroup.ca, or 647-727-4668. And I would definitely love to hear your thoughts, behind God's role in all this, because I really don't know. Now, the other crazy thing that I've thought of, and you may or may not believe this, is my father's role behind the situation. And let me explain. You see, my father and I hadn't talked in about 25 years. Actually, my mother, my brother, sister, and I walked away from my dad about I was about 20 years old, so it would have been about 25 years before my surgery. And I'm not going to get into the details of the situation. All I will say right now is that, people who knew him on the outside thought he was a wonderful person, but no one really saw what was happening behind closed doors. And three young kids, and a wife do not leave a father and a husband who is a good person. There were some serious things happening behind closed doors, and that's the reason why we walked away. Now, this would have been, I believe, September of 2018 when he passed away. And that was about a month or so right before my scheduled stress test. And my stress test I was having every 2 years for about 10 years, more precautionary. But he had passed away, and we had never talked. We did reach out to him, knowing that he was a few weeks away from dying. He was struggling from stage 4 prostate cancer, and he didn't want to talk to us, didn't want to see us, which was fine. And that was a very sad situation for us as well, to be honest with you. But I wonder sometimes if, and again, if you believe this or not, in the afterlife, or if he had made a deal with God where he wanted to maybe correct things or do right by us. And he had a role in me uncovering this situation, and having my surgery, and not joining him a lot sooner than I should have. So I don't know. I don't know if he had a hand in this. I don't know if because everything that happened to me was without any indication of a problem. I even have a list of all my medical records and my testing that we had done. Because again, my stress test, I've been doing it for over 10 years now. And they didn't just do a stress test. Every single time I'd go in, they do an ECG stress test. I think it was an echocardiogram is what it's called, where they kind of do an ultrasound of your arteries. And everything was normal. Size of my arteries was normal, nothing enlarged. Everything was fine. So I just wonder if he had a role in all this. And again, if you are listening out there, if you have some thoughts or want to provide some input, um, I would ask you to reach out to me if you're willing to share your thoughts. Jim@tvhgroup.ca or 647-727-4668. And maybe the final thing that I will say, that I've learned from all this is, how I've changed is how I'm currently dealing with this COVID-19 situation and the virus. I will admit that if I hadn't dealt with a near life-ending experience like I did last year, that I probably wouldn't be as interested or as heightened about the pandemic and the COVID situation as I am today. But I am really, 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 I'd say, more aware of the concerns that we have with this virus. The fact that it can be fatal, the fact that it's avoidable if we just follow certain rules that are being set out for us. Knowing how precious life really is, because I had almost lost mine last year. I've said to people that I didn't fight for my life last year to give it away to a virus by not following certain rules. What it's also done for me, unfortunately, is in seeing friends and family who I love and care for playing what I feel is Russian roulette with their own lives and with other people's lives by not following the rules the way they're supposed to. It's really caused a lot of deep concern and disappointment for me. And I really think that that's a result of, again, what I dealt with last year, because I really do understand how precious life is. And I hope that with this virus that people would take it more seriously, especially the people that I love and care for, that they would take things a little more seriously and stop playing Russian roulette with their lives, because I don't want them to feel what I felt. I don't want them to feel that fear and concern that I felt last year, and wondering if, you know, last year was going to be the last year of my life. I don't want to have any of my family or my friends have to live that way. And if all they did was just follow certain rules and took it seriously, there's practically zero chance that they would have to face what I faced last year with my life. And again, it's avoidable. Mine wasn't avoidable. Mine was, a generic disorder that I have. We knew that I had it. We knew that I was at risk, but never did the even cardiologists think that at age 46, I was that close to losing my life. So I think that's really it for today in terms of what I've learned. There's still things that I'm learning as I go. I still do become a little more emotional when I watch things on TV that have to do with people losing their life or seeing their lives saved. I was an emotional person before, but I could control myself. Now I just feel things a little more deeply than I did. And if you want to reach out again to me, please feel free to reach out to me. Um, if you have some thoughts, if you have an opinion, I would love to hear from you. Again, it's Jim Leo at TVH Group. Sorry, it's Jim at tvhgroup.ca. My name is Jim Leo. I can also be reached at 647 727 4668. And God bless everybody. Take care.